Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Deborah Olashansky. I serve as the Community Relations Director for the Jewish Federation and Jewish Foundation of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. And on behalf of our co-sponsors this morning, Congregation Micah and the Temple, we thank you for being here and for joining us for this important program. Right at the conclusion of this program will run about an hour, and right at the conclusion, we will move into a conversation about a women's journey to Israel that we have planned for October 21st to October 30th of 2022. So anyone who would like to learn more about that trip, please just stay on. You don't need to log out and come back in. You can just stay on this call and we will move right into the information session for that trip. Also, you have a function on your Zoom. If you go to your reactions button, it will allow you to use the raise hand function. If you have a question, please use that raise hand function and we will call upon you so you can ask your question directly. If you prefer not to do that, if you prefer to put it in the chat, that's okay too. I will be monitoring the chat and will ask those questions as well. But if you are comfortable, our guest, Anat Hoffman, would prefer for you to ask directly. So use that raise hand function in order to be called upon to ask your question directly. Again, I'm very grateful that both Rabbi Lori Rice and Rabbi Shannon Mackler have joined us this morning as our co-sponsors, and they will be helping us with the program and the question answer pieces. And we look forward to a very informative and interesting conversation this morning. With that, I will ask Michal to show the opening video, and then we'll go right into the program. Again, thank you for joining us.
Put on your face, know your place. Shut up and smile, I could do that. 'Cause no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill. They may see a monster, they may run away, but I have to do this. I can't keep quiet. No, no, oh, I can't keep quiet. No, no, no one woman right. Oh, I can't keep quiet. There'll be someone who understands. Must be someone who understands. There'll be someone who understands. I can't keep quiet. Oh, I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. No, I won't keep quiet.
Good morning, everyone. Well, before I begin, I feel like it's appropriate for me to put on my favorite talit, and I know Rabbi Mackler has one as well. So I am Rabbi Lori Rice here at Congregation Micah, and I am very honored and privileged to welcome our guest this morning, Anat Hoffman, who is with us from the Israel Religious Action Center. And for those of you who don't know, the IRAC, Israel Religious Action Center, is the public and legal advocacy arm of our reform movement in Israel. Now, I can tell you that previously, Anat held a seat on the Jerusalem City Council, where for more years than she probably can count, 14, I believe, she stood in opposition to the policies of the city's right-wing and ultra-Orthodox administration. She is also the chairwoman of Women of the Wall, which you just saw in the video, a group of Jewish women and men from around the world who strive to achieve the right of women to wear prayer shawls. This is the Women of the Wall prayer shawl. And to read the Torah from the Torah collectively and out loud at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Basically, Anat has dedicated her adult life to the Jewish principle of tikkun olam. And we are so thrilled to have you with us today to share with us. That video was indeed emotional, provocative, especially for those of us who have been privileged to be at the wall, and even for those of us who have been privileged to be part of a Women of the Wall experience on Rosh Chodesh and know how special and important that is. So I'm going to be quiet now, mute myself, and welcome. Thank you for being with us here.
So shalom from Israel. I'm really looking forward to this. Mostly I'm interested in the other half of our conversation, and that is when I'm going to hear your comments and we're going to have a dialogue. And the reason is that I've heard me before, and it is you I haven't heard. And I'm so sorry I never got to Nashville, because I wanted to meet a Nashville bum. I wanted to go to the wrong side of Memphis. I wanted to see a sundown in Nashville, visit me in the Music City. I know some of the songs about Nashville. These are all titles of songs about Nashville. Nashville Without You. Yes, it is a music capital, and I'm so sorry I never get to visit. So yes, my name is Anat Hoffman. I'm an Israeli. I was born here almost 68 years ago. I just recently moved from Jerusalem to Haifa. It's earth-shattering. It actually was an article in Haaretz about me moving to Haifa after living all my life in Jerusalem. I fell in love with a guy from Haifa, but that's another story, and that's why I'm here. The wonderful thing about Haifa is that there is a beach here, and there's the Mediterranean, and Haifa is a very sane city. I'll be talking to you about a city that is less than that. Jerusalem is the largest city in Israel. It's the capital of Israel. It's the poorest city in Israel, and it's going to be 1 million people in this metropolitan area. And as you know, it's the holy city too. And sadly, holiness does not make it, doesn't focus on people, but rather on God and how people interpret what God wants. The rabbi said correctly, we're fighting, Women of the Wall are fighting for 4 activities, religious activities that begin with the letter T. One is tefillah, to pray out loud. Believe it or not, but 33 years ago when we just started, we were not allowed to pray out loud. Jewish policemen would come to me and say, lower your voice, you gotta shush. You can't make, a woman's voice is disturbing to men. The second thing is to put on phylacteries, tefillin. Some of us do it regularly and want to do it together at the wall. The third is to read from the Torah, yes, the Holy Scroll for the Jewish people. Men are allowed to read from the Torah, and women are not allowed to read from the Torah. And finally, talit, to wear a prayer shawl. Let me just tell you that just 30 years ago, not only were we not allowed to wear a talit, a policeman would show us how to wear it, and we were supposed to wrap it around our neck as if it's like a scarf. And there was fashion police. They would actually go to you and say, you're not wearing the talit correctly. You're wearing it like a man. You're supposed to wear it around your neck. Yeah. So these 4 activities, praying out loud, putting on phylacteries, reading from the Torah, and wearing a talis, were illegal in Israel for the past 3 decades. And tragically, some of us, 56 of us to be exact, were arrested or detained in the Jerusalem police for breaking the law. I have to wipe that smile off my face because it really isn't funny, but the truth is that the law is the law of holy places. And the law of holy places naturally says you're not allowed to spit on the wall, you're not allowed to piss on the wall, you're not allowed to put graffiti on the wall, no slaughtering of animals at the wall, no photographing on Shabbat at the wall, no begging. Oh, okay, Otazoy. You go to the wall and you'll see that there's a lot of begging going there, but that's against the 7th regulation. But then there is the 13th regulation of the law of holy places, which is fondly called the Women of the Wall regulation because it applies only to us. And here it goes. One cannot perform a religious act contrary to local custom, which offends the feelings of others. And anyone doing so is punished by 6 months imprisonment. Let me go over it again. One cannot perform a religious act contrary to local custom. Who decides what's local custom? Isn't that a good question? That offends the feelings of others. I don't know how you exactly monitor the offense to the feelings of others. Anyway, this is called the Women of the Wall regulation because it applies only to us. I can't think of one religious act on the men's side that is offensive to me in any possible way. Trust me, I've spent much time at the wall looking for one activity that may offend my feelings, and everything done at the men's side is fine with me. And I think everything done in the women's side should be fine too, especially praying as a group together. Our group is unique. We're the only, I think, group in the world of Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Reconstructionist, and unaffiliated that pray together as a group for over 33 years. I don't think there's another group, certainly not a group of men, that's been able to pray together. Oh, there are groups that study together, and there are groups that sing together, and there are groups that travel together, but a multi-denominational group that prays together from the same text. We fought over every word for 6 years, but we produced our own Siddur with the help of the Women of Reform Judaism. We published it. Everyone coming to the wall with us, here's another plug for your trip on October. You will get our Siddur with my own inscription. I will give it to you with my warmest regards. If you come and join us, you will have one of the Women of the Wall Siddurim in English and in Hebrew. And it's quite a feat that we are able to run ourselves, despite the fact that I'm Reform, my deputy is Conservative, and the executive director is Orthodox. We are getting along together very, very well. And there's a message in that. I think, instead of regulating against us, the state of Israel would be well advised to learn from us. There's something wonderful about this group. Anyway, when many of us were arrested, something wonderful happened in North America. North American Jews woke up, and Mr. Netanyahu, maybe you don't remember, but he used to be our prime minister. Oh, that gives me such joy to say he used to be our prime minister, and he is no longer our prime minister. But when he was our prime minister, he couldn't visit North America without being asked by one woman or another, what about the Women of the Wall? How can you arrest women for doing what we do normally in our synagogues? How could this be an offense? 6 months imprisonment? How could this be a law in Israel? Wasn't the whole idea of the Jewish state is that we're going to have a sovereign state and we'll run it according to Jewish values? And what are Jewish values? Ethnocentricity, supremacy, chauvinism, or equality and tolerance and pluralism? What are the Jewish values of the Jewish state? So you were outraged, and that's good news for us because you have a great power that is underused. You have tremendous nuisance value, which you are encouraged, I think, by generations of Israelis to see silence as a patriotic act. I think Israelis encourage North American Jews to keep silent their criticism of current Israeli policy by saying to them, This is a sovereign state of the Israelis. It's not yours. You don't send your children to the army. You don't serve in the army yourself. You don't pay taxes in Israel. By what right would you tell us what to do? Well, it's a fraudulent argument, and I'll tell you why. First, every time we have a problem in Israel, hand in hand, we are there in Nashville asking you to help us out. We had a fire in the Carmel, we had a disaster in the Mediterranean, we had a thing in Beersheba, something. We run to you for help. So excuse me, when it behooves us, we are partners. And when you are saying to us, why don't you change this policy because it affects me and it reflects on me, then you're not allowed to be partners? No. The second thing is no Israeli. And I don't care how many wars he fought or she fought and how many guns they know how to shoot. I don't know what are the measurement of super Israeli. No Israeli can tell a Jew from Nashville that he or she has no place around the table when we discuss what are the values of the Jewish state. I think not only you have the right to say what you think are Jewish values, I think you have a duty to say it. And I encourage you, I'm true blue Israeli, and I'm telling you, our group is reaching out to you and begging, demanding, I don't know what verb to use. You must take a stance. Israel reflects on you, Israel affects you, and this silence, you're doing us no favor. You must voice what you think should be the policy that you believe in at the wall. The wall is the holiest site for all Jews. And the policy that says that women cannot read from the Torah, not only not read from the Torah, we're not allowed to hold, hey, we're not allowed to gaze at it. Where is this book? I have the rabbi of the wall wrote a book. Here it is, just hold on. It weighs 7 pounds. It is big. It has over 600 pages. I will read to you what the rabbi of the wall, the person that costs $1.5 million shekel a year, what he writes about women. And this is the only thing in the whole book referring to women. 1, women who are menstruating should be very careful and not touch the holy rocks of the wall. And they should not enter the main plaza that is a holy synagogue. 2nd, women who are in the women's section, לא יסתכלו בספר תורה בשעה שמגביהים אותו להראות לעם, should not lift their eyes to look at a Torah scroll in the men's side when it is lifted. Ladies, that's insane. There are 600 photographs in this book. $100 if you find one image of a woman. You know what acrobatics it takes to take that many pictures of the wall and not get one woman in the frame? I want to say something on Rabinovich's behalf. Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich, the rabbi of the wall. He is entitled to these opinions. No problem. Israel's a democracy. He can believe that women should not gaze at the Torah. He may believe that women should not walk in the streets or enter a bank. He can believe anything. He should not be the person that the state of Israel deposits in his hand the keys to the holiest site of the Jewish people. He is not fit for this job. You know why? Because we're half the Jewish people. And he cannot get if he gets his kicks putting us in jail or detaining us or doing a physical search for every one of us when we come to the wall, looking for a Torah scroll. Do you believe that a rabbi actually orders the police and the guards to do a physical search on every woman on Rosh Chodesh because he is worried that one of them will bring a Torah scroll to the wall and read from it? Hello, this is the Twilight Zone. Now you may say, okay, Anat, you are there's no doubt that you are injuring the feelings of others. It's offensive. There are ultra-Orthodox people that the mere voice of women in the women's section disturbs them no end. And you've got to be considerate and tolerant and maybe flexible and more elastic. Well, since I've been running the group for so many years, in 1990, I petitioned the Supreme Court, and I asked that women of the wall be allowed to pray 11 hours in a year. Immediately, I get phone calls from our friends in North America. How can you settle for only 11 hours? You know how Americans are, 24/7. We deserve 365 days a year. How could you? And I said, friends, sisters, watch and see. 11 hours will never pass. Just watch and see. I want to bring out the argument. What would be the legal argument against 11 hours in a year? In a year, there are over 5,883 hours. I want 11 of them. Not only did I ask for 11 hours, I asked that the Minister of Religious Affairs himself will decide when will be the 1 hour when women of the wall can put on their talit and read from the Torah. It could be 4:15 in the morning. It could be 5. Put us in the worst hour in the day. Just give us 1 hour. And sure enough, the minister comes to the Supreme Court, and listen to this. He says, it's not that they disturb the feelings of others. Hello, he's been saying that for 15 years. No, it disturbs the wall. And I know what the wall wants to see, and I know what the wall wants to hear, and it doesn't want to see this group, it doesn't want to hear them. This is, yes, even so, it's not that we disturb the feelings of others. There are people in Israel with quite a bit of power, political power, who think the wall is disturbed by our voices, and in order to protect the wall's feelings, they are not willing to give us one of the 150 Torah scrolls, which are there for public use, but only members of the public who pee standing up. That's it. No woman can have use of these Torah scrolls. When I asked the rabbi for one of them, he said that the donors who donated the Torah scrolls to the wall, they don't want women to touch it. I said, okay, I'll donate one. It will wear pink. It will wear exactly the talis that Rabbi Lori was wearing, exactly that talit. You won't mix them up. It will be flowery and pink. I'll donate the Torah for women. And he said, I don't accept gifts from prostitutes. Did I make a case about taking the keys away from him? He should not be running the wall. And just so you know, he's one of the most popular rabbis in Israel. If he wants to become chief rabbi of Israel in next year, there are elections. I'm sure he will win. He's considered very open, in that when Ivanka Trump came to the wall, he gave her a special tour. And when Madonna came to the wall, he was very, very nice. Jewish or not, he goes overboard to be nice to women from abroad who are very famous. He never met with me or with any one of our board, and we are there every month. I enjoy the fact that in Wikipedia in Hebrew, the third sentence about him says, and he has had wars with women of the wall throughout his tenure, because he is, I don't think he has any religious argument or theological argument against us. This is all about funding and power and influence. And he wants to say, I decide how this holy place will be run, and no one is going to challenge me. And our courageous group of women, as I said, of all denominations, have been there for 33 years, during uprising, during the snow, during the pregnancies. We started as single women, we're now grandmas. A few years ago, there was a bit of snow in Jerusalem. We went to the wall. Let me tell you, ladies, we don't have the equipment. We thought that if we put our feet in sandwich bags and then put them in the shoe, then we'll be all right. The shoe won't get wet. We arrived frozen at the wall we just don't have the equipment for snow. And we built a snow woman. And we gave her eyes and a nose, like you see in magazines, a carrot and a face. And we put a tallis on her. Sure enough, a policeman props in the middle of the women's section and says to us that snow women cannot wear a tallis. Ladies, if it wasn't so serious, this has so many comic aspects, this whole struggle, because why is it comic? Because it's bound to lose. They're bound to lose. There will be a day, I assure you, that the state of Israel not only will allow a bat mitzvah with a talit, with phylacteries, with a Torah, and with praying out loud. The state of Israel will encourage this. This will happen. But instead of leading the Jewish world to that moment, Israel is being dragged, kicking and screaming to do what's right, doing what's right. And I hope you are infuriated by this. And I hope you say to yourself, I'm going there in October. I'll join the women of the wall in their prayer. And I'm going to write a letter today to the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Naftali Bennett, or to the President of Israel, Mr. Yitzhak Herzog, or to the Israeli ambassador in Washington, Mr. Mark Herzog, who's a brother of Yitzhak Herzog. I will write them a letter how outraged I am that something so natural, authentic, and real, like praying as a group, is being deterred by the government of Israel. Just as before I end the outrageous statements and open it up to hear your comments, I just wanted to say that every year we have made advances, and in 2014, actually a little earlier, the police thought it would be a good idea to bar me from the wall because I'm a troublemaker, and if I'm barred, maybe that would limit the amount of provocation. So they arrested me, I went to the police, and then I went to court, and in the court, the police asked that for 90 days, I will not be allowed at the wall. And the Judge Kaduri, with a big kippah on his head, he approved this immediately. The next month, I was not allowed to go, but the police took 5 of our board members, took them to court and said, let's bar them too. They're also troublemakers. But it wasn't Judge Kaduri then, it was another judge. It was Sharon Larry Bavli, a feminist with a hyphenated name. And she said, wait a minute, who decides what's local custom at the wall? The police said, oh, the rabbi. The rabbi said, I decide. She said, show me. And it turned out that the rabbi was never given the authority by the government of Israel to decide what is local custom. The police made a terrible mistake. They went and appealed at the higher court. They said that the feminist is all wrong. And then we won the Sobel decision in 2014. Judge Sobel has a kippah on his head, but he has 5 daughters at home. He's an Orthodox judge with 5 very brilliant daughters at home, and I understand a very brilliant wife. He wrote 8 pages, the Sobel decision, and one of the decisions that was recently recognized as one of the 100 most important decisions in Israel's legal history. And the Sobel decision says, since the rabbi of the wall does not have authority to decide what is local custom, and since women of the wall have been at the wall 33 years, I decide that they are by now local custom. And we are now recognized as local custom, and therefore we are able to wear a talit, pray out loud, put on phylacteries, light a menorah, bless the lulav, read Megillah, All this is now kosher. The only thing we're not allowed to do, Torah. Torah. And we wish to read from the Torah. Just one more comment. When the hardest part of my job is not being yelled at, spat on, arrested, or ridiculed, as happened this recently. That's not hard. The hard part is that there are quite a few young girls that call and say they want to have a bat mitzvah with us, and I can't promise them a Torah scroll. I have to turn away a girl that wants a bat mitzvah, and she is rare. In a recent study, we found that 95% of girls in Israel don't have a bat mitzvah of any content. They have something called a bat mitzvush. Only 5% of Israeli girls have a bat mitzvah where they do something that resembles what boys do. The statistic is, of course, reversed for boys. So if one of those girls calls and says, I learned my Torah portion, I know how to lead the congregation, I want to have a bat mitzvah with you, and I have to turn her away, that's the hardest thing I could, that's very hard. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to be able to say to her, come on, young sister, you're going to lead us. I promise you a Torah scroll. You'll have a beautiful bat mitzvah, like your cousin, like your brother, like everybody else. And you're going to have it with us at the women's section. That's it. I'm dying to hear what you have to say. Let me just say that if you start speaking before unmuting yourself, make my day. I love saying to someone, you know, Shana, unmute yourself. It gives me a kick.
And I'm muting myself for a second because there's another video that we haven't showed. Do you want to show it, or we're gonna skip it?
No, we'll skip it.
Oh, sorry.
It's a hard movie to see, and
Okay.
I want to encourage you to come.
Just making sure I'm not missing anything.
Anat, I'm going to get us kicked off so people can start to feel warmed up and comfortable raising their hand or putting questions in the chat. And Rabbi Mackler may have one of her own. I'm sure we have several just between the two of us. But in your mind, what are the next steps that need to happen to move the needle? And how does that involve us?
Oh, I can think of one thing that would move the needle, and that is if Mr. Joe Biden and your Secretary of State, or maybe Nancy Pelosi, who's coming to Israel next week, will mention that not allowing women to read Torah at the wall is a break with the values we share with the United States. This is something that is that the United States sees as very serious, and would like the government of Israel to consider changing this policy. That would be lovely. And you know, the United States has done that, just that, with other countries that had serious breaks with civil rights. For example, when Saudi Arabia had a law that women are not allowed to drive, the American president mentioned that this is a problem. I'd like that. But second to that, I would like AIPAC, Hadassah, ADL, AJC. You are members of all these organizations. I would like them to make resolutions that say they believe that women have the right to read Torah at the wall, and it's time to implement the wall agreement. The wall agreement that was born because of your pressure says that there will be two plazas at the wall. One will be an ultra-Orthodox plaza where the rabbi can build a partition as high as the Empire State Building. But the other plaza will be egalitarian, equal, and open, and we will run it, and it will be friendly, and women will be able to read Torah at that plaza. This decision, the Kotel Agreement, was signed and voted by the government of Israel in 2016, annulled in 2017 by Mr. Netanyahu, and now Mr. Bennett is who's sitting in a coalition with 7 parties. 5 of the parties are very much for the Kotel Agreement, but 2 parties, including his own, is not very much for it. I would like that American institutions that he cares about will have a resolution. If AIPAC had a resolution that it's high time we allowed women to read Torah at the wall, I think the Prime Minister will hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Felicia, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, Anat. This is Felicia Anchor. We have met at the wall a number of times, and I remember my first visit with you very well. It was the very first time I ever saw a rat anywhere. But my question is this, and I also remember, and I believe it was your daughter. We went up into Jerusalem, where your daughter did read from the Torah in the synagogue there. I'll never forget that experience. I'm very confused about Israel right now. I read this morning that there's going to be a female attorney general, which is very exciting news. And I know that there are women who study at like the Shalom Hartman Institute who are trying to interpret the biblical law in a way that is responsive to women. I was told in an earlier conversation about Women of the Wall that Israelis don't care about this issue as much as Americans do. And I know people have said that the synagogue they don't go to in Israel is the Orthodox one. I wonder if you could just comment on this juxtaposition and why you don't feel there's more of a groundswell among very bright, progressive women in Israel to be stronger in supporting this as part of a coalition.
Yeah, it's true that the Israelis care less about this topic compared to North Americans. However, the numbers are growing, and I remember days where Women of the Wall were not a million. We were not even 10 women. I can actually recall one Rosh Chodesh where I was the only woman of the wall. However, now we're hundreds. So we are getting some traction. But it's true that Israelis, if there's something that I'm very angry with the Orthodox monopoly over all religious issues in Israel, is that it robbed Israelis of the ability to dream that things will be different, that they can't even dream it. And when you look at Israelis who go to North America, and I'm sure, raise your hand if you have business with an Israeli, if you know an Israeli in Nashville. There are Israelis in Nashville, I'm sure. So if you notice, these Israelis never come to synagogue. If they do, it's a rarity. I'd like to talk to the Israeli who comes to synagogue, but usually they don't. Second, they're very arrogant in thinking that they are super Jews. But let me tell you something about those super Jews. Israelis in North America assimilate twice as fast than North American Jews. And God knows North American Jews do assimilate, so twice as much. Israelis are actually not inoculated against assimilation at all. And the reason is that they think, as I said, they're super Jews. I'm quite shocked by how ignorant many Israelis, I'm talking about secular Israelis. Secular Israelis are very ignorant of Judaism. Ask an adult Israeli some questions about Judaism and you'll be surprised. The thing is, many times North American Jews believe that if someone speaks Hebrew perfectly, they're a super Jew. Well, let me tell you, there are 1.4 million Israeli Arabs who speak Hebrew better than many of your rabbis, and yet they're not Jewish. I actually know a Chinese professor in Shanghai who speaks perfect Hebrew and he's not Jewish. Speaking Hebrew does not a Jew make. What's the making of a Jew? What you're doing now, devoting your Sunday to look at an issue and think about it through a Jewish lens and be a community together. And that's what makes you Jewish. And Israelis, sadly, are inundated with a million other issues. Women of the Wall was not an idea that grew up naturally in Israel. It was an import, and I'm very grateful to North American women who came up with this idea 33 years ago. Actually, just so you know, I wasn't going to join the American women who were going to go to the wall to pray at this conference on empowerment Jewish women. But one of them ran into me at the Hyatt Hotel in the lobby, and she complained that they're not letting her rent a folding table at the hotel. And do I have one at home? I understood all the English that Rivka Hout told me at the lobby that day, except one word. She comes from Flatbush, and she said that they need a folding table to put the Torah on the table. That one word I didn't get. What is Torah? Let me tell you what it is. It's Torah. And that's how they pronounce it in Brooklyn. Anyway, it is an import from abroad, and I'm very grateful for this import. And it's I think the final frontier. It's what Israel would be in decades from now. And that's why Israelis who are look, do you know that Israeli women are paid half than Israeli men on the same job in the municipalities, in the Jewish agency, in government offices? I did one of the pioneering studies in Israel looking at this, and Israelis are not marching in the streets against that. A monthly reminder that she's a woman making 46% less than her male counterpart. Now, that's something I would walk in the street. If they're not fighting for that, would they fight for the right to read Torah? Not so much. However, I did read a few weeks ago, someone wrote, we need to fight the electric company like women of the wall. And he meant to say with tenacity and resilience like these women. You know, Gandhi said that first they will ignore you, then they will ridicule you, then they will fight you, and then you win. We're exactly going through these stations. And yes, we will win.
Anat, thank you. Sue Hochberg, who actually happens to be my mother, has a question.
Hello, Anat. I haven't seen you in a long time. I am now chairman of the board of Hebrew Union College.
Woo! Shalom, Sue.
Shalom, Anat. And by the way, I bought her that tallis when I was there. Let's go back 5 years. As you well recall, when we came, if you talk about women not being accepted, we came as our board meeting in Jerusalem, and we wanted to pray at the wall. And we actually had a whole police conflict. We had board members hit. You have to, everyone understand what Anat is trying to tell you. On the plus side, I will tell you, our Jerusalem campus, which is right between the King David and the David Citadel Hotel, our dean is a woman, Rabbi Nama Kelman. She's wonderful. We have just ordained, I believe, 130 rabbis on the Israel campus for Israel. And in fact, this last November, one of them was a Rabbi Cantor, the first ever that we have ordained for Israel. And I see my colleague Jay Geller, he's not on the screen, but he's my board member, is on this call. So I'm glad to hear that. This conflict is not only about women, but the reform movement as well in Israel. And yes, we're making small steps, but you can talk to how hard this has been for all of us. And any of you go to Israel, we would welcome you at our chapel on our Jerusalem campus. They're wonderful services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for your service with HUC as well. We are grateful for all that you do. Susan Simpson, do you want to share your question with us?
Well, it's not really as much a question as really a thank you. I had the privilege, we belong to the Micah, but also Temple B'nai Shalom up in Fairfax Station. And our founding rabbi and her husband are very involved with Anat and making sure this happens. And I actually went on our synagogue trip, and it hit me full force when Rabbi Perlin took us to the women's section, and we were 10 deep in a very small section of the wall. And I looked over to my left, and the area where the men were was wide and expansive. They had chairs to sit on. There were 4 men there with laptops, and they were just sort of chilling and hanging out. And when the Israeli military conscript women to serve just like men, but we're not allowed to worship at the wall in an egalitarian environment, it makes me feel so sad. And our daughter had lived in Israel and has gone several times as well, is also involved with supporting this. And so, Anat, I just want to thank you for what you're doing and how meaningful it's been to me and our family. So thank you.
So thank you for this comment. Let me just, I just want to ask you for one thing, Susan. Don't be sad, be angry. Please. This is not a reason for sadness. This is a reason for a good, healthy anger. What Israel needs is a kick in the butt, and we can think of doing it. There are many ways that you and I can help make it happen. For example, one of the problems of Women of the Wall is that we're not heard loud enough. The minute we start praying, the rabbi turns on the loudspeakers and he starts praying exactly as we, not an hour before and not an hour later, just as we start leading our prayer, that's when he turns on the loudspeaker. So we're not allowed to bring a loudspeaker. He is not willing to let us use the loudspeaker, but we found out that the sweetest spot acoustically in the whole basin is smack in the middle of the women's section. And we want to start a choir. And the Cantors Association North America has joined us. Rabbi Deborah Kachko, Cantor Rabbi Kachko, and they found a choir director, and we're now actively seeking singers, professional singers who can project, and we will be heard everywhere. Seriously.
Anat, at one point you all were doing selling talit for Women of the Wall. Are you still doing that?
Where is Nechama? Is Nechama still here? Nechama, are you with me?
I'll put our website in the chat right now.
So why don't you say something about the talitot, Nechama?
I had bought one for our daughter, and I would love to have gotten one for me and didn't. So I'm selfishly asking. So thank you.
Well, I'll put the website into the chat. We've got 3 styles. They're all exquisite, and we would love for you to join us in solidarity and wear that when you pray, and know that you're being enveloped by all of us here. So thank you.
Thank you, Nechama.
I see a question here about the swimming.
Yes, go ahead, Anat. That if we're going to expand the family, that's my husband, and then we're going to throw it to Deborah after the swimming.
Okay, so thank you for this question, and I do have an answer here. One is that in swimming, I learned that you cannot swim without getting wet. That is a physical impossibility. You do get wet when you swim. That's important for a social activist. But I'll tell you what's the most important thing. In order to be a competitive swimmer, and I was Israel national champion for many years, so you need to pull right under the center of gravity of your body. If you look at the wonderful Katie Ledecky, right now you're champion in the 800, 1500, 400. She is really tremendous. You will see that Ledecky pulls right under her stomach, under the focus, the center of gravity of her body. That's the hardest place to pull. It's easier to pull to the side, but you don't get anywhere. You do need to pull where it's hardest. I think the wall, ladies and gentlemen, is the center of gravity of religious coercion in the state of Israel. And that's why we're focusing there. Susan noticed correctly. The men have 48 meters and women have 12. Here's a math question. How much bigger is the men's section from the women's section? The answer is 4 times bigger. And that is just an expression of the being second-rate citizens. And I think it's one of the most important struggles in modern Judaism. And I think we're going to win. And I think we're going to win it because we were able to break partitions. First, break the partitions between ourselves, the Orthodox, Reform, Conservative members of the group. Second, the partitions between ourselves and North American Jews. We have sisters in Brazil, in South America. We have sisters in New Zealand, and we certainly have sisters in Nashville. And finally, only a few years ago, we broke the partition between us and men. menfolk. And the first ones that joined us were the paratroopers, the original paratroopers from 1967, the ones who fought and were killed and injured at the wall. They joined the Women of the Wall, and they say something really quaint. They say, we captured the wall from the Jordanians, but you women, you are liberating it every time you come on Rosh Chodesh. They're in their 70s, and they show up to protect the Women of the Wall.
I think we have a question from Deborah, and then our last one, I think, might be from the Stoneman Schimberg household.
Yes, thank you. So Anat, and you sort of just alluded to it again. I think one of the things that often is not spoken enough about with Women of the Wall is how you are including different streams of Judaism. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how you built that coalition, and also how you are including and incorporating the voices and needs of Orthodox women in this conversation.
As I said, I inherited the Women of the Wall. There was this conference on the empowerment of Jewish women, and the conference included women of all denominations. Rivka Hout, that asked me for the folding table, she's very Orthodox. And the group had women of all denominations there. This is an idea that would not have entered my head in a million years. I inherited it from you. You know what a diaspora is? What a diaspora is? It is a botanical term, and it's a plant that can implant itself by surfing the wind from one place to another. I want to thank the diaspora for sending us this diaspora. I'm on the ground here in Israel, that's true, and our courageous group is there every month, but we would never have come up with this struggle if it wasn't for you. Caring enough about Israel, it's a patriotic act to bring this idea that there is equality everywhere, including in the holy places.
Thank you for that. I love that. Eric and Jessica, Rabbi Jessica, do you want to?
Thanks. Good morning, Anat, and thank you so much for what you're doing. And Deborah's question leads actually perfectly into my question and statement, and that is that my first deep exposure to Women of the Wall was through my teacher of blessed memory, Rab Bana Devorah Haberman. And many of my teachers, my smicha is through Jewish Renewal, and many of my teachers in Jerusalem, in Israel, come from many streams of Judaism, and in particular from Orthodoxy. I was raised in the Reform movement and had a very clear sense that the Reform movement was the way to break down barriers. And yet my experience now in my middle life is that it is through collaboration and coalitions among the many different streams of Judaism that we get to the future that you're envisioning. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the growth of women being ordained across the movements, not just in the diaspora, but in Israel as well, and how that is impacting your, I want to call it your fight, your cause. It is a fight, but it's also like you're really pushing us forward in a beautiful wave. And I wanted to, if you could talk more about that collaboration.
Jessica, I agree with you. And I would say even more. I think the bravest feminists I know in Israel today are Orthodox women who are making headway in a very difficult society to be recognized as teachers of halakha and rabbis and all that. I admire them deeply. And not just that, the struggle that I led in my other hat at the Religious Action Center was that we represented 26 women who wanted to sit in the front of the bus. We had 2,500 rides every day where women were assigned to the back of the bus because the Orthodox rabbis decreed that buses that have that are segregated have less accidents. I kid you not. They found the statistician that actually testified in front of the Ministry of Transportation Commission, and he explained. I was told that it's like a drunk person using a lamppost. He used it for support, not for illumination. But he used statistics, and he showed that segregated buses have less accidents. He was that close from saying that they have less punctures in the tires. We won this case, and just so you know, in every bus in Israel, over the driver, over the exit, and over the entrance, there is a sign. It says, every person can sit anywhere they want. Anyone harassing a passenger about their seating is guilty of a crime. However, we discovered that Israelis don't adhere to signs, and we had to sue 13 individual bus drivers and get them to pay damages to women because they did not help them sit in the front of the bus. After that, we won the El Al case. Again, an Orthodox client that refused to take it, that our El Al steward, how do you say a male steward? A male steward, asked her to move on a business flight from Newark to Tel Aviv. He asked her to move from her seat because the guy next to her didn't want to sit next to a woman. The Rene Rabinovich precedent, for your information, is the following. If you are on an El Al flight, we just won with EasyJet, so any one of the carriers to Israel, if you are on a flight and an ultra-Orthodox man refuses to sit because he's not willing to sit next to a woman, and everyone is pushing you to move to a different seat so that we can take off because we're going to lose the window, raise your hand if this has ever happened to you or you know anything about this. Okay, if this happens to you, you must find the stewardess. You must find her. Say to everyone who's telling you to move, just a minute, I must ask the stewardess what to do. If the steward or the stewardess tell you to move, or with a movement of her hand indicates that you should move, or in any kind of physical or mental gesture approves that you move, it is worth $18,000. Did I make myself very clear? Just make my day. If this happens to you and a stewardess tells you to move, it's worth $18,000. If you moved because another passenger pushed you, can't help you there. Has to be El Al or EasyJet or American or whatever, if they ask you that. So here are two cases where we represented Orthodox women, and they're very brave to fight. Yeah.
Well, Anat, we just want to thank you. We look forward to your visit to Nashville in person to join us and see the gift of this community, which is, among others, our belief and lived experiences with pluralism here and respect among our denominations. It is truly wonderful.
Shana, I want to say one more sentence. Please. I want to thank you and everybody on this call for entertaining me and inviting me. Let me just say that not every community invites me in. I am not speaking about the rah-rah Israel. I didn't talk to you about the cherry tomato or the disc on key or the Nobel Prize Israelis won, and I didn't talk about that. I talked about a wart on Israel's behind, on something very difficult, that the one place where Israel is really bankrupt is Jewishly. And that's not something easy to hear. And I thank you for doing it. Let me just share with you, this is many years of marriage speaking. I think love is what remains after we know the truth. And we spoke some hard truths about Israel today. And I know that you love Israel no less by knowing that this is something we're struggling with and that you have a role in helping us out. What is your role? As Jews, to speak up about the values you believe in.
Thank you for that. I really do. I believe the same thing. And I think knowing the truth that makes us appreciate the work that you are doing and the advancements that have been made. It was great for us, those of us who have been able to join you at the Kotel to celebrate Rosh Chodesh, to remember the joy even among the challenges, and to know the continued need for justice and equity and tolerance and unity. On a 2005 trip to Israel, you spoke with our temple group about these same issues and our need to garner support and activity and participation in your efforts and continued struggle. And when I lived in Jerusalem 20 plus years ago, there was a pluralism campaign that said, "Yesh yoter mederech echat lehiyot Yehudi." There is more than one way to be Jewish, that we are strengthened by our diversity and our collective participation in authentic Judaism, with access to all holy sites and all holy rites. But there is work to be done. And if I can quote you, Anat, from a different time I learned from you, we can either throw up our hands in defeat or roll up our sleeves and get to work, but we cannot do both. Well, we are inspired to roll up our sleeves, to raise our voices in tefillah, in prayer, and to raise our voices in justice, to raise our voices to read Torah and to wear tefillin and talitot if we choose. And if we join the work that you and others do, it would be that sign of a positive future. On behalf of Klal Yisrael, we are grateful for the work that you do for women, for progressive and pluralistic Jews in Judaism, and for the sake of all of us. So thank you. We are grateful for you and the time together today.
Amen. Thank you also to Rabbi Lori and Rabbi Shana for being with us today and helping facilitate this dialogue. And many, many thanks to Anat and also to Nechama for helping Deborah and myself set this event up for today and for everyone who joined us. We are now going to transition into our information session about our upcoming trip to Israel, our women's journey. So if you are interested in learning more about that, please stay on, I would say on the line with us, on the Zoom with us, and we'll pick that up in just a second.
And while we are transitioning, just to let people know that we do hope to join Women on the Wall during the journey to Israel in October. So that will be another way to support their work. And to see
And I dare anyone on the plane to try to make us move.
I know I'm already thinking about $18,000. I mean, I could do a lot with $18,000.
Oh, I would just
give it to the Federation campaign now that I'm looking at there.
I would just do it for the fight.
I know. Leslie, you're going to be going to sit. It's not even going to be your seat. You're just going to see an ultra Orthodox man and you're just going to sit right down next to him. I know you. You'll be like, make me.
I will not move under any circumstance. I do not care how long we sit here. It's not happening.
So Leslie, if you want to share a little bit about what inspired you to start planning for this trip in October, and then Carolyn, I think, will join with some sort of nuts and bolts. We'll start with the sort of broad view of your vision for the trip, and then Carolyn will share some details.
Okay, and Christy, are you here as well? Yes, okay. Yeah. I apologize to everyone. Okay, perfect. I apologize to everyone. I'm in the car. So if I'm bouncing a little bit, that's why. But I'm so excited to finally be able to take the chance to talk publicly, openly with a group about our upcoming women's trip. We've been planning this for a really long time. Christy Weimers, who's on this call as well, and I came up with this idea. I can't pinpoint the exact date, but it was pre-COVID, so like in the before times. And we were on a Federation call with Libby and Moshe Worthen. And Libby started talking really passionately about how she kind of changed her whole philanthropic view and her level of activism and involvement from a trip to Israel that she took when she was younger. And Christy and I kind of simultaneously texted each other. This is such a great idea. And so we decided that we wanted to try this with our current local community in Nashville. So we hoped to take a group of women together to Israel. We hope to really build a community out of it. So we're hoping that we'll be able to have people sign up and pair together in Havruta. So learning together before we go and on the trip and after. We were trying to be holistic about the trip. So we want to touch on spiritual aspects, look at fabulous women artists in Israel, do culinary events inspired by women, or go to women-owned restaurants and chef-driven women chefs and things like that. We wanted it to be hands-on and interactive and just amazing. So really to celebrate women and to bring some of those messages back from Israeli women to Nashville. Christy, do you want to chime in with other things that we were hoping when we start?
I would, but I think you covered everything. We've talked a lot about this offline and in the planning, and that covers it pretty darn well. And we are very, very excited about it.
All right. So with that, I think we're going to turn it over to